And welcome back. Rusty here with the Rugby Review. I'll start off by saying I have to pardon me for being MIA the last couple of weeks. I was traveling for the holiday season, so happy holidays to everybody. Happy New Year. And with that being said, I'll be playing a little bit of catch-up. Got to go through URC round 7 and round 8. So with that being said, we're going to go over round 7 of the URC today. So give a little bit of a recap on what games took place in round 7. So again, round 7 was December 19th and 20th. December 19th was 2 games, Cardiff Scarlets, and then Leinster versus Ulster. And then there were 6 games played on December 20th. So here we have the results for both Friday and Saturday. So game 1 on December 19th was Cardiff versus Scarlets, Cardiff 17, Scarlets 21. And then we have Leinster versus Ulster, Leinster 24, Ulster 20. And then 6 games on Saturday, December 20th. Game 1, Stormers versus Lions, Stormers 34, Lions 27. Game 2 was a lovely Italian derby match. We have Benetton versus Zebre Parma, Benetton 21, Zebre 15. Game 3, 1872 Cup. I think it's 1870, maybe 1876. Anyway, Scottish derby, Glasgow versus Edinburgh, Glasgow 24, Edinburgh 12. Game 4 of Saturday the 20th was Ospreys Munster, Ospreys 10, Munsters 26. Game 5 was Hollywood Bets Sharks versus Vodacom Bulls. We have Sharks 21, Bulls 12. Last but not least, big game here. Cardiff broke their losing streak, Dragons broke their losing streak finally in the URC. We have Dragons versus Connacht, Dragons 48, Connacht 28. So what we're going to dive into first is the games on Friday, then we'll tackle the games on Saturday. First game we're diving into is the Cardiff Scarlets game here. So what we'll see here, this was a huge defensive effort by Scarlets, who, again, they played a lot of defense, and then when they had the ball, they took advantage of it. But truth be told, Cardiff left a lot to be desired. So let's take a closer look. As we'll see up here up top, both possession and territory very heavily favorited towards Cardiff in the black ink there, both 65+%. And then just to emphasize the point of Scarlets playing a heck of a lot of defense, look at the tackles made stat, 110 tackles made for Cardiff to 220 for Scarlets, literally twice the amount. Take a peek down at the bottom of the slide, meters gained, 474 meters gained for Cardiff to 236 for Scarlets. Again, Cardiff playing a lot of offense, Scarlets having to put in a huge effort on defense, and I think the part that ended up killing Cardiff, because, they were very dominant, hugely dominant team throughout most of this game. Turnovers lost, and turnovers won. Turnovers won. Scarlets had 11 turnovers won to just 3 for Cardiff. And then the real Achilles heel, turnovers lost, 14 turnovers lost for Cardiff. So again, very strong defensive effort for Scarlets. A lot of turnovers won, a lot of tackles made. But Cardiff also shot themselves in the foot a little bit here with so many handling errors and just coughing the ball up back to the Scarlets so easily. So, good for the Scarlets to get that win on the road, but if Cardiff cleans it up a little bit, this is a very lopsided game. I'm sure about that. So let's look at our second game of Friday, which is going to be an Irish derby. And this is going to be between Leinster and Ulster. Now, truth be told, this was a tale of two halves here. Ulster was the much stronger, much more dominant team in the first half, and then halftime happened. Leinster got their act together, put their pseudo-bomb squad in, and then completely dominated the second half. I think Ulster may have scored 3 points in the second half, and Leinster ended up scoring 24 to win the game. So what we'll see, and we're just going to zoom in on the top half here, what we'll see, possession, territory, very heavily favored towards Leinster, both 60+%. Ulster ended up having to put in a huge shift defensively because once Leinster got that offensive flow going, it took a lot to keep this game from getting too out of hand on Ulster's part. So you can see that with tackles made. So 134 tackles made for Leinster, 243 for Ulster in the red ink. Just a huge, huge defensive effort that had to get put in. And that was just to keep this game from getting too crazily blown out. Because, again, once Leinster got the offensive ball rolling, it looked like Ulster was just hanging on for dear life in that game. Moving on to the first game on Saturday, we have a lovely South African derby here. Really close game, one-score game here. We have the Stormers versus Lions. And, if you look at this stat chart here, the biggest thing you're going to see is just how even it is pretty much across the board here. So let's zoom in on the top half here. Possession, territory, very, very evenly split between the Stormers and the Lions here. The only thing that you'll truly notice, and it kind of makes sense based off possession and territory stats, Stormers had to play a little bit more defense than the Lions did. But as you can see, Lions also had a little bit of possession, territory favored towards them. And then a little bit further down on the stat sheet, meters gained, 365 meters gained for the Stormers, 383 for the Lions. Again, it's a very close game, and the stat sheet's going to resemble that, where it's very close between the two teams. It was just good defensive effort by Stormers to hold out the Lions just that one time. Now, if we look a little further down the stat sheet here, I think the one thing that got the Lions this game was penalties conceded. Stormers did a great job playing a very disciplined game of rugby, only conceding 6 penalties, whereas the Lions conceded 12. That's just once you start getting 10+ penalties conceded in a professional game, it's tough. It becomes tough for that team committing all those penalties. So, good win by the Stormers. They keep their undefeated season alive. Tough loss by Lions, but I guess consolation, they do get a losing bonus point out of this one. So hopefully that'll help them towards the back end of the season. Now the next game we're going to move into is the Italian derby match here. Really close game, really tight competition here. We have Benetton versus Zebri Parma. So if you're just looking over this, it's a very close game. Possession a little bit favorited towards Benetton, territory a little bit favorited towards Parma. Tackles made, virtually identical. I will say Benetton did do a better job making meters, and they did a better job with their offensive efficiency. As you can see with that meters gained stat there, meters gained 358 for Benetton to 275 for Parma. So despite how close and how even everything was, when Benetton did have the ball, a little bit more effective with it. Now, what I really think is the most important thing to look at is turnovers lost and penalties conceded. So what kept Benetton from really blowing this game wide open was that turnovers lost stat. Benetton couldn't really hold the ball very well this game. Don't know why. They were just making a lot of handling errors. However, Zebri could not truly make Benetton pay for it, because if you look one line below that, penalties conceded, only 3 penalties conceded for Benetton, so great disciplined game, but Parma let up 13 penalties. It's almost like every single time Benetton turned the ball over, Parma's giving up a penalty, so it kind of negates that advantage there a little bit. So, good win for Benetton here. Definitely want to keep, you always want to win these derby matches with the rival. That's absolutely for sure. And speaking of derby matches, we got a really good one. This was the Scottish derby match between Glasgow and Edinburgh. So, close through the first half, going for halftime, come back out. Glasgow's a new team and really starts running wild on Edinburgh in the second half, which forced Edinburgh to put in a huge shift defensively. So we can really see that from the top half of the stat sheet here. Possession territory very much skewed towards Glasgow, both 60+% towards Glasgow. And we can see with the tackles made stat, this is to showcase the huge defensive effort Edinburgh had to put in today, or not today, when this game was played. Tackles made, 287 tackles made for Edinburgh to 138 for Glasgow. Huge difference, huge discrepancy there. Again, just emphasizes the point. Close competitive game in the first half, but then Glasgow got it going in the second half and had Edinburgh put under a lot of defensive pressure. Meters gained also emphasizes this point, because Glasgow had 421 meters gained to just 209 for Edinburgh. So, good start to, it's a 2-game series between these two. It's an aggregate score, so, we'll kind of go back real quick here. So it's an aggregate score, so you add up the scores from the first game and the second game. Glasgow is off to a good start, has a 12-point lead going into round 8's matchup, which that'll be the true decider for this particular derby matches this year. So zoom in and move on to our next match. It's a good game between the Ospreys and Munster here. I don't know what it is about Munster, but the more defense they play, the better it is. And so what I mean by that is this was just Munster using their defense to help fuel their offense this particular game. And Ospreys actually had a pretty good game if you look at it from a stats standpoint. Possession plus territory favoring Ospreys. 58% for both to 42% for just Munster and the Red Ink. Tackles made. Munster, again, this is where the huge defensive effort for Munster comes in, making almost twice the amount of tackles as Ospreys did. So Ospreys 114 tackles made to 211 for Munster. But look at that success rate, 94% success rate for Munster. They're not missing very many of them. And of all the amount of tackles that they had to make, they're not missing very many of them. And if you look at that meters gained stat, just emphasizes the point of Munster using defense to kind of help fuel their offense. They don't have many meters gained, but they were very effective and very efficient with the meters they did gain. And if we look a little further down the stat sheet here, Munster was very efficient on offense, and clean breaks is the stat I think that emphasizes that point. So despite Ospreys having more possession and more territory throughout the game, Munster had 4 times the amount of clean breaks as the Ospreys did. So the defenders beaten was an equal stat. So defenders beaten 14 for both Ospreys and Munster. However, Ospreys defenders beaten only translated to 2 clean breaks versus Munster, who had 8 clean breaks on 14 defenders beaten. So it was very efficient, great conversion rate for Munster in this game. Moving on, we've got a South African derby here, the other South African derby. Very, very highly contested game. This game was a lot of fun to watch. It was a very, very strong performance by the Sharks, and it took a full 80 minutes to really just sign, seal, and deliver this game home. If we look down at the bottom half here, again, all we're just going to see is a very close game between both teams. And, the Sharks, they just did a great job with the ball in hand when they were on offense. If you look at meters gained, 370 meters gained for the Sharks to only 265 for the Bulls. So Bulls were playing a little bit more offense, Sharks were playing a little bit more offense with the Bulls having a little bit more of a defensive load. I will say, Sharks did a great job with the ball in hand when they had it, but they need to improve their discipline if they're going to keep a good thing going, because penalties conceded 13 penalties conceded to a very disciplined 8 penalties for the Bulls. They were fine this time and in this game, but once you start getting 10 plus penalties in a game, it's not usually a favorable outcome for the team that's getting 10 plus penalties in a game. So strong win, good win for the Sharks this week. Hopefully they can keep that good train rolling into next week's match. And our last game of the week here, this is almost like a historic moment in the URC. The Dragons finally won. And it was a hard-fought match here. Make no mistake of it. Dragons definitely much more efficient offensively when they had the ball. Obviously, they're scoring a huge amount more than Connacht is. Possession territory does favor Connacht. Both teams had to put in a huge shift defensively. But, again, Dragons very effective, very efficient with their ball when they were on offense. So if we just look at meters gained real quick, 499 meters gained for Dragons to 411 for Connacht. So, it's not like Connacht isn't, getting any meters on the field. Dragons just happen to be getting a lot more. Now, the one thing, actually couple things to look at from a Connacht standpoint, turnovers lost. 13 turnovers lost for Connacht to just 4 for Dragons. So that's a lot of handling errors for Connacht right there, giving up the ball back to the Dragons, who obviously were playing really well this week. Look at defenders beaten, 36 defenders beaten for the Dragons to just 15 for Connacht. Both of those translated to 13 clean breaks for Dragons and only 6 clean breaks for Connacht. So, again, both teams putting in a huge shift defensively. Connacht had a little bit of the dropsies this week, some handling errors that it obviously cost them. Huge number of defenders beaten by Dragons, large number of clean breaks. They were running wild all over the place, scoring a lot of tries. So, congrats to the Dragons, finally getting that win. See if they can keep it rolling. So, that was all the games for this week. Let's take a look at the live ladder. So, there was a little bit of a break between round 6 and round 7. We can thank Challenge and Champions Cup for that. What we will notice is we still have Stormers at the top, undefeated, and Cardiff, Munster, Glasgow, Ulster bringing up the rear. I guess 2 through 6, Same teams, just in a different order. Lions, Bulls still hanging out in the top 8. Yeah, not too much motion going around, but Ospreys, Dragons, Scarlets kind of doing a little shift around. Sharks are starting to climb up as well, so Sharks have gone from 14 to 12. I can imagine there's going to be a lot of more shifting up and down this ladder as the season progresses. And with that being said, let's take a peek at the next round. This is round 8's schedule here. 2 games, Boxing Day derbies, 2 Welsh derbies going, so that'll be a lot of fun for those games. Those are happening December 26th, and then the following day, December 27th. 4 games to be played. You've got all derby matches this week in the URC, which is the best. So much fun. You got the Italian derby going, Parma, Benetton, Scottish derby, Edinburgh Warriors, and then both the Irish derby games going, Connacht to Ulster, Munster, Leinster, the huge one. And maybe this was like a predetermined rescheduling, but the South African derbies have been rescheduled to later in the season, and if I remember correctly, it's for travel purposes. I guess they didn't want the teams traveling too much between the European and intercontinental competitions and the URC, so Lions Sharks has been rescheduled to February 21st, 2026, and Bulls Stormer, the big one, rescheduled to March 14th, 2026. So hope everybody had a good holiday season. Hope everybody enjoyed the rugby games that were going on. If you liked the video, drop a like, drop a comment, subscribe, and I will catch you later for round 8. Have a good one.